I have been so inspired by what I have seen this community do in the last 2 days that it's actually been very difficult for me to focus on one story that I wanted to tell you tonight in the short time we have together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight some of what I think has been the most important messaging and the most important highlights in the last couple of days. Because think about what's going to happen, right? We're here together. We've done all this great work from being with people who are really deep subject matter experts in technical issues, in scaling, in financing, in business models, and all of these great panels that we had. And then all the way to this afternoon when we did a futurists activity looking at the long scale. So we flexed our muscles. Futurist Amy Webb calls this the flare and focus. And we've gone from the very small to the very large, and then we're all going to go back home, right? We're going to go back to our problems that we're solving every single day. We're going to go back to the same people that we talk to. And I think what I want to do tonight is to give us touch points to take back with us so that the impact that we're dreaming of in this room gets translated into action once we get home. So I was so moved by Jennifer's talk last night. Did you all feel the same way? I mean, she really captured a lot of why we do this. And she also used language that I think we should be using to tell our stories as well. And this is the part where I make a confession. I don't work in aquaculture. Boo, I know. You're supposed to say, welcome, Tiffany. Yeah. No, instead what I do is I go around the world. I talk to people who have solutions. I talk to people who have problems. I talk to people who have money. And perhaps the most important thing that I do is I talk to people about the future. Because this is a future that we're building together. And it's really important to have a North Star for what that should look like. So when Barbara and Ron reached out to me about this event, I thought, well, I don't work in aquaculture. I don't work in fish feed. What is in it for me in this particular community? And I'm happy to say that I only had to spend about 15 seconds on the website before I understood what that was. So show of hands, how many of you have been to Antarctica? A few, okay. So in November, I went to Antarctica with a group of 100 women and non-binary people with STEM backgrounds for a leadership development challenge meant to turbocharge our ability to work on sustainability issues. And going down to Antarctica was a very difficult choice for all of us, right? Because we know that tourism, even the most responsible tourism, which IATO and other organizations are practicing today in Antarctica, it has an effect on the land, right? And so for me, the deal was when I go to Antarctica with these amazing people, I have to come home and transform that into impact. And I think when we make the decisions to do things like travel here together to talk about sustainability, how many of us got on a plane to be here today? Right? These are all choices that we're making. Now, so if you're interested in sustainability and DEI and leadership, please come talk to me. I would love to talk to you about ways to play that forward. Also, Antarctica. Do I have 700 penguin pictures? Yes, I do. If you want to see penguin pictures, I'm your girl. But what I really want to show you is the day before Thanksgiving of this past year, I got to visit Palmer Station, which is the northernmost of the American Antarctic research stations. And that was exciting for me as an American to be there the day before Thanksgiving. And not only did I see penguins, but I saw krill. And it was so wonderful being able to be that nerdy, to stand over a bucket and take pictures and to push other people out of the way to get my picture of the krill, because so many other people wanted krill pictures. My favorite part of this talk right now is knowing why I don't have to explain to you why that's awesome. That's awesome, right? This room is so special because we are nucleated here in the last 2 days around a very important challenge. and that is replacing krill in fish feed. And we had some great talks yesterday giving us messaging around why we should care about that for so many reasons. So whether you're in this room because you're an innovator, whether you're someone who's looking to use these innovations in your own company, if you're a sponsor, if you're a funder, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing because it matters. Can we applaud for ourselves for just a moment here? Because it's really important to stand in this moment. When you're trying to do something big, like transform the world's food supply, that's a big, thorny problem. And each of us brings a separate perspective to how to do that, how we would like to see it done, and what we think good looks like. We worked a little bit on that this afternoon. But how do we take all of the stories that we've heard over the last few days and transform that into our own worlds, not just into our professional networks, but to our families, to our local communities, all the people that we talk to every day? We have a chance to tell them not just what we do ourselves, but what we have seen others doing in this room. And today we had a wonderful panel exactly about storytelling. Now, storytelling is very interesting to me because, I'm a molecular biologist by training. I was taught that I don't belong in the story. And that might have worked years ago when I was in graduate school, but that's not the way our world works anymore. And so I want us to remember that we've heard key messaging over the last few days, that we can be using in our own work to help share the vision of what we see the future to be and to bring more people along with us. We talk a lot about thinking about our customers, always putting the customer center. And yes, I completely agree with that. We want our customers to buy our fish. However, our customers are also people. And so finding ways to put people, including ourselves, in the centers of our stories is very important. So what I thought I would do is show you a way that I tell the story of synthetic biology when I am standing in front of rooms of people who have literally not thought about DNA since they were forced to in high school. I always make a joke. I say like, oh, just in case you don't think about DNA all day, every day, like I do. And then, I wait for someone to be like, I do it too, Tiffany. No one has ever said that. Except in this room. I believe there might actually be people in this room who talk about DNA with their kids. But again, it's the way we tell the story of technology that helps us build an understanding that the future isn't inevitable. It's not something that happens to us. It's something that we build intentionally every day. And that's what we do together as a community and as a broader society. Thank you. I'm glad that resonated. And it's a super important time to do this now because we're at this amazing moment where the boundaries between the living world and the non-living world, the silicon-based world, are breaking down in really important ways. And for me, I'm a molecular biologist by training. For me, there can't possibly be a better time to have ever been a biologist than right now. The power that we have, the precision that we have, the potential that we have is totally unmatched in human history. And I find that inspiring and motivating and wonderful. I was going to say awful, but I mean that like with an E, full of awe. But we know that not everyone feels that way, right? When we go out in the world and we talk about genetic engineering or CRISPR or these various amazing techniques that we have, people have concerns, right? It can be everything from that's not natural to you're trying to play God. And I'm not going to argue that we should ignore those concerns. We can't ignore them. But what we can do is tell our stories in ways that honor people's concerns and highlight our shared values. Now, for me, the big take-home message, the one that I go around the world telling people, is that today, biology is technology. And so I look for ways, metaphors, to show them that they actually already know about some of these things. And I'm going to come back to that. But this idea that biology is technology is something that we're seeing reflected in some really important legislation and strategic plans around the world. So the Biden administration here in the United States had an executive order back in 2022 that was meant to spur you can see it here, sustainable, safe, and secure American bioeconomy. Now, of course, well, I had an interesting discussion today where there was a bit of variation in how effective people believe political movements like this actually are. We can all have another glass of wine and then talk about that, I think. But the important part is I saw the word bioeconomy in the world's headlines. That was a really important moment. And of course, the US isn't the only country to see the potential for the money and the advances that could be made using a bioeconomy, biomanufacturing, and synthetic biology. In March of this year, the EU published a strategy called Building the Future with Nature. Loved that. And there are many countries around the world that have published bioeconomy or biomanufacturing strategies at varying levels of rigor. And so, again, we're definitely not the only one. This map came out in December 2023, and I know that it's already out of date because it's neglected the Middle East. And we know, for example, that UAE and Saudi Arabia have both published strategy documents intending to be major contributors to the global bioeconomy. And of course, depending on which projections you believe, we're talking about trillions of dollars of value over the next coming decades, which means jobs, which means opportunities, which means sustainability. So as I'm talking to people about synthetic biology and the future of biology, and biology is technology, what I'm always trying to get down to is, what are they most concerned about? Is it jobs? Is it their kids? Is it something else? And sometimes when I take the time to listen, I can learn really interesting things. And I want to encourage you to do that as well. It's an authentic kind of listening rather than talking, which is hard to do when you're holding a microphone. But it's super, super important in how we show up in the world. So for me, the most exciting part about synthetic biology as a suite of enabling technologies is that it empowers us to build on nature's 4 billion years of innovation. We don't have to invent all this stuff from scratch. Nature has gotten us a lot of the way there. And when I talk to people about how this is possible, I use terms like Jennifer used last night. I say DNA is the software that all life on Earth runs on, right? And DNA is a coding language and a parts list. Your body is hardware. And I always point out, you already know this if you've had an RNA vaccine, right? The RNA vaccine was the software, you got injected it, your body was the hardware, you booted it up, boom, you are synthetic biology. Now, for me, what's great about these opportunities is we should look for them. So remember last night, Jennifer got on stage and held up a pair of leggings from H&M, right? That was fantastic. And I said, wow, I should have thought of that. Because you might not understand genetic engineering, but I bet you understand leggings, right? And in the food, no, you don't understand leggings. I have a disagreeing voice. We'll talk later. So in this room, we have the benefit of working in food. Everybody eats, right? And we care not only about what we put in our bodies, but what we put in our families' bodies. And when we can align around that set of stories, this is the kind of future that we're trying to build for our children and their children and their children. That's a really powerful way to message. And this is why, when I came back from Antarctica, I put together a series of articles that I'm publishing once a week this month, where I talked to a very famous polar oceanographer about why what happens in Antarctica doesn't stay in Antarctica. And I would like to invite you all, first of all, come follow me on LinkedIn, but to share your stories like this. Because the more we can lean into this type of storytelling and amplifying each other's efforts, the more we can get into this. I was just talking about this at my table. I feel like our lives today are a signal to noise ratio problem. There's so much noise. We need in this room to pledge to be the signal, not the noise. And that's how we can really help each other. So when I talk to folks about synthetic biology and where the promise is and building on nature's 4 billion years of evolution, I love to point out that we have such a large parameter space to play in, not only with the microbes that we're familiar with and have been using for so many years, but there's so much more to the kingdom of life. And we heard in some panels yesterday, a very practical view of saying, let's focus on the microbes, those chassis strains that regulators are familiar with, that we know are safe. That's all great. It's very important. But when we go back up to that high level view and we take our strategy viewpoint again, we need to remember that nature is giving us so many places to play. And I always love to point out that, that's all unicellular life. All multicellular life is down here in the lower right-hand corner, including us. There's so much innovation that can be possible in the synthetic biology world. And that's just looking at natural systems. So I know we're having an AI moment. I argue that the great AI breakthrough was actually AlphaFold, right? When we had DeepMind's algorithm that gave us the structure of every protein known to man. A prediction, that 200 million. And I don't know how many of you saw, just the other day, DeepMind announced AlphaFold 3, which now has made structural predictions for every biomolecule and how they fit together, not just proteins. When I was in graduate school, you could spend 8 years figuring something like that out. Now it's 150 milliseconds, right, for a prediction. So that's amazing. And we're seeing now humans and algorithms working together in really exciting ways to design proteins that have new structures, new functions that we've never seen before in nature. And even LLMs are able to do this. This is where I love blowing people's minds, where I say there are biology LLMs because biology is a language. So it's not just ChatGPT for pirate poetry, which I do too. Don't get me wrong, I use ChatGPT for that. But when we look at how other innovations can spur innovations in our particular ecosystem, the sky's the limit. This is the most boring that it's ever going to be. And I love that. And I hope you love it too. So when we talk about synthetic biology, we just scratch the surface really of what this whole ecosystem looks like. There's lots more pieces here. And so what I like to say is no matter what you're into, synthetic biology has something for you, right? Including lawyers. Whenever people ask me what jobs are going to go obsolete in the next 20 years, I'm like, not lawyers, no way. So there's so much potential here, and there's so many ways that you can play and that you can bring other stakeholders into this future that we're building together. Because when it goes for a circular bioeconomy, we're able to not just protect the environment. We're leading to jobs and better industry, cleaner things, and which feed up to a variety of these UN Sustainable Development Goals that take a broader view of what sustainability really means. Chef alluded to that while he was talking a minute ago. And so when I talk about this, I'm not just talking about a circular bioeconomy on Earth, but I point out this can be true for anywhere people call home. That's right, I said space. Stay with me. This is where it gets interesting. So just last week, I was in Washington, D.C. at the Humans to Mars Summit that's run by a nonprofit that I work with, Explore Mars, to talk about how synthetic biology could be a very important technology for getting a sustainable human presence on Mars, right? I want my ahi tuna when I move to Mars. I don't really want to take fish. So how can I make that magic happen? But also, it's a really important example of how innovating for space also makes life on Earth better, and vice versa. How many times have you heard, well, I have to choose between sustainability and price? How many times have I heard, I have to choose between Earth and space? These are false choices. We don't have to make these choices. Instead, what we can do is look for ways to work together to solve the fundamental problems wherever they occur. And that's what I really, really love about this community. because the decisions that you guys are making today stand to impact millions, if not billions of people for generations to come. We're here as leaders and pathfinders for the future of food. So what kind of leader do you want to be? We can go back home and we can solve our business's problems right now. We can solve our technical problems. We can get these products to market. But we have another choice. We can push for big, bold thinking. We can prioritize sustainability by design from day zero, not as a value add, but as our core value proposition. And we can adopt a legacy mindset that will make it more likely that our economies, our communities, and our planet remain sustainable for the long haul. Today's brainstorming activity was meant to get us into that space, to really take that long view and say, what are the big challenges that might take us 25, 50, or 100 years to solve? By the way, we don't have that much time. That's why we did that prioritization. And how are we going to go home and decide to move forward with what we identified? Because we have to make the right choices starting today, not just for profit, not just for prosperity, but for people and planet as well as peace. You know, when we talk about our food systems, we're talking about a resource that we like to believe is infinitely renewable, but it's not necessarily unless we make these choices today. So when we leave this room tonight or tomorrow, if you're still sticking around, I hope I'll see you at tomorrow's brainstorming session. I'm very excited for the next step. We need to remember that the choices we make as individuals, as organizations, and as a community really will reverberate around our planet for decades to come and anywhere people call home. We're not just the future of feed, we're the future of food in this world that we're building together. And I'm really looking forward to being on that journey with you. Thank you all so much for what you do.